Okay, so here we are live, going into Hedy Fry's office. This one is because do you want to step out, sir?
Well,
you okay to get in here?
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Hello.
Hello.
How can I help you?
Well, my name is Ted Smith, and I've come over from Victoria with this Valentine.
Yeah.
I know Hedy Fry is not likely to be here,
Yeah.
but I would like to have you give this to her, and I would like to ask her to be my love.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll pass this along.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a note or something for her as well? Or?
Well, you know what? I should probably bring in one of our strategic plans.
Yeah.
We've set up a little kind of protest house party out front. So we have some donuts and we're going to play music and order pizza. And we're not angry at anyone here. But we are upset at the way the government's legalized it. And in Victoria, we have a 24-year-old compassion club that's been raided by the community safety unit. And they've shut it down. Just yesterday, fined $1.5 million.
It's the Cannabis Buyers Club.
Another dispensary in town.
They've been open over 20 years.
Expecting one of about $800,000 for selling cannabis. And so our mayor and council have actually written us a letter in support of getting an exemption from the provincial and federal laws. And we're really hoping that the federal Liberals will cooperate and help us to continue to provide the services that our patients rely on. And so I will have a follow-up letter explaining things with an attachment that has the mayor's letter on it as well, so that he has a better idea. I know today was somewhat of a surprise. Warren
And there's some cards here. I'm sure you have our contact.
Well, it's interesting. The last ones that are standing were also a lot of the first ones that started, right? And they're still around, and a lot of people have.
All right. Take care of them.
Thank you very much. And yeah, if there's any concerns with the rally, please just come and talk to me. But we should be one of the most peaceful, friendly folks you've ever seen around here.
Perfect.
Yeah, Nikki worked really hard.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Yeah.
It's made with love. Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right. There you go. I think I got
love.
Oh, so you shut it off?
Oh, just not now I did, the second.
There you have it.
Let's go for it.
Protest for compassion. Compassion on Valentine's Day. That should be a no-brainer.
Love is the answer.
Love, but compassion.
The trouble is they love money,
Wow.
and they need to love people. The love of money is what's got us into this mess.
You know, people can also make a lot of money if you just love them first, maybe.
Gotta put people over money.
That might help you. I don't know.
Especially if you're talking about sick people, right? Like patients.
Yeah.
Like the phrase "patience over profit" is very powerful because, you know, making profit before people can get access to something that's going to help them in their life when they're a patient and suffering. Like, who does that? That's one of the most horrible things you could maybe imagine doing. Like, here's something here, it could work for you, but you can't have it, you know, because we want to make money first. Like, you can have it if you pay us enough, right? Who does that, right? Like, come on. Mother Teresa, did she, like, you know, help people only after they paid her? Like, come on.
I never smoked her cannabis, but
yeah, I don't know.
No. I think it's an entirely fair, entirely fair point, entirely fair protest. Just come on down. Where are we, Neil?
Well, what's not fair is in a world where public servants think that they can put in restrictions for people who just want to feel better from getting what is a natural herb. We have a natural right to the plants on this planet. And I don't care if it's a dictator, but a public servant telling somebody that, you know, you can't have this plant here unless you pay a bunch of money, you know, or who are these people? They should be doing everything in their power to make sure that people that are sick and suffering get whatever it is that could help them. And in the case of cannabis, it's a no-brainer. And the only reason we're not able to do it is because people just want to make the money first, and they're so concerned about profits that they're going to let people suffer and die. It's sad. It's very sad. So happily we're here, and we made a difference, and we're making a better difference, and it's going to be all right. But we got to fight for it, unfortunately, and here we are doing just that. So
there you go. Nothing to be afraid of. This is fear should not result in someone else
suffering. Should be much more afraid of the donuts on the table than any of the plants or the magical vapors that are running around. That's for damn sure. Careful with that. That's addictive, sir. That's a drug that you need in your mouth. You too.
No. Thank you everybody for coming today to another kind of house party protest, we're calling them, because for a lot of reasons when we have these events and gather, we're here both out of anger. It's this irony that really draws us together in a time where our governments are doing things and they say that they're here to help people, that they want to help people with addictions and in pain. And yet the way that our federal government has legalized cannabis has been the complete we would like to see it go. And so I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Ted Smith. I'm the founder of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club, a compassion club 4 years ago to help provide cannabis products, especially alternative products, to patients that are suffering from serious medical problems. And when we started our club 24 years ago, it wasn't a matter of if we would get arrested, it was a matter of how many times we would get arrested, and of getting arrested under the best possible circumstances in court for changes, but for changes in what we call the court of public opinion. Because this is a war that's been engaged upon in many levels. And so we, as a community, in this 24 years have been incredibly successful at engaging in that war on many levels, and have won not only in court, but obviously in the court of public opinion, because the public has agreed basically to legalize cannabis, and we're doing that. Unfortunately though, the public has been duped as to why and how this has been done. The public was told that they were doing it to protect children, when in fact it is all about the money. Right. And what we've seen with legalization has not been an inclusion of the formerly known black market, what we like to call the gray market or the green market.
The legacy market.
The legacy market. Legalization was announced, we'd all hoped that would be the case, that this $5-6 billion industry in Canada would be given licenses to be able to do their work. Because the majority of people that were working in the cannabis industry were only doing that. They weren't involved in other crimes. It's a heat score to do other crimes, And so for the majority of people, they would have been more than happy to switch their dispensaries or their grow ops or their distribution chains or their chocolate companies to the legal system. However, instead of doing that, our government's decided that legalization should be a complete corporate takeover, and that a completely new supply chain should be created to and remove the black market so that they could then count all the dollars from top to bottom and control the economy of cannabis as much as possible. But it's been a complete and utter failure, to the point where not only is the former legacy market struggling and many people being put out of business. In Victoria, we had over 40 dispensaries 2 years ago, selling hundreds of locally made products. With products coming from across the country. But the BC legacy market that Sean Horgan and company would like to say is important to them has been virtually demolished by this legal system, except for the fact that these greedy people have kept the prices the same on in the storefronts, if not higher, actually dramatically higher, to the point where there's a lot of money still to be made in the legacy industry, though the risk is much higher. And so instead of including the legacy market, we've got now, twice as many producers, twice as many distributors trying to sell to virtually the same number of people, and everybody is hurting. The legal cannabis companies on the stock market have lost a value of approximately $33 billion in the last year. Now that $33 billion didn't just disappear somewhere. That $33 billion that was lost by average Canadian workers thinking that they're putting some money into a Canadian cannabis company have got suckered by these entrepreneurs that set up businesses and hypervaluated them far more than they were worth so they could sell shares in order to profit off businesses that lose billions of dollars or millions every quarter, and many of them will go bankrupt within the next year because of responsibilities. They're laying off staff now. Problems, but it's too little too late. They've built these massive farms that are completely inadequate to grow high quality medicine and producing far more low grade cannabis that are then being put into systems that delay the sale to the market so long that it's really old and low grade in these overly packaged products that are just completely inadequate for recreational users compared to what they were using with the legacy market. And I could go on for a long time about the problems of the recreational scene and all the money being made. But honestly, to us at the Cannabis Buyers Club, those are the least of our concerns. But they are big concerns that affect people from one end of this country to the other. Our concerns at the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club are primarily for the patients. Our medicine at low cost to survive every day. If our patients were forced into the legal supply chain, quantities in the legal products are so low that many of our patients fighting cancer and arthritis and other serious problems would have to buy hundreds of packages. The numbers are quite astronomical. One of our staff last week, Dylan, wrote an article kind of outlining the differences in cost between, say, our chocolate bars at the club, which cost $26 for 750 milligrams, and if you were to buy the same amount of THC in chocolate in a legal store, we're talking about $450. And we have many patients like Nikki who can eat one of them for breakfast just so that she can work through the day. And so it's completely disproportionate to what our patients and many other patients across Canada have been accustomed to when they've been purchasing cannabis products from dispensaries or online distributors. And so when cannabis was made legal, and some of these issues were coming up, we knew that there would be problems. So we wrote a strategic plan. And in our strategic plan, we have a couple of very important things that we would like to see happen. But we recognize that there's three massive hurdles to our organization complying with the law. The first one is the low amount of THC allowed in the products. As long as that limit is in place, we cannot comply without risking the health of our patients. It's just something that we're not going to do, especially in this that I haven't touched on yet is a consumption lounge. At our club, for 24 years, we've provided a safe place for our patients to use their cannabis. It always seemed absurd to sell them some herb and then kick them to the street to go smoke it. So we've made the legal system yet here in Canada. They are now starting to talk in Ontario about having consumption lounges. Here in British Columbia, there's been no such talk publicly, although there's been hints towards it. In fact, the city, Victoria, last summer, the city clerk said that the province was looking at it and told the city council, don't bother with the pilot project because there's going to be new rules come out from the province. Well, those new rules don't seem anywhere on the horizon. And for people that use cannabis that are of low income in particular, the options of where to smoke are very limited. If you don't own your own home, you really have nowhere to go. And even if you own your own condo, you're still not going to be able to smoke herb in your own owned building. you really are very limited if you don't have a friendly landlord to where you're able to smoke. And so our patients rely heavily on our facility because in the wintertime especially, there's nowhere else to go. But also because we have a community. We have built a very safe sanctuary for patients to come to, where in many cases they feel safer in our place than they do in their own homes. And it's something that they come to because it's family to them. It's a place that they can go to and relate to people and feel normal, even though they're not, because nobody else in our club is normal. We all have one problem or another. And it's a community that is unheard of in today's day and age, and one that we will fight for to the bitter end. And so luckily we have actually beaten Island Health and worked safe to keep that facility going. And sobs, and now we have like 15 different types of capsules that we make using different types of cannabis at different strengths, and hash caps and rosin caps and all these different options. But in the rules that exist today, our club would not be able to own its own processing facility and retail store. If we opened or created a processing facility that got fully licensed and had a fully licensed retail store, we could sell our products to everybody else, but our club would not be able to sell our own products. That's how they've written the rules. They claim to protect us from big business taking over. But in fact, it really severs our club in half, where we would essentially have to choose between one or the other. It wouldn't, it's something that we're not going to do. We're going to do both. We're going to have a fully vertically integrated system where eventually we'll be able to grow our own herb and then make cookies and sobs and creams out of that, and then sell that in our retail locations. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be allowed to do that, except for the government wants to make money at every single stage of the game. So they want to be able to buy it from the growers and then sell it to the processors, and then the processors have to sell their products back to the government along every single stage, and makes money along every single stage. So it's really about money and control. It has absolutely nothing to do with what's in the best interest of our patients that need good, fresh, high quality, low cost medicine. And so that's the third problem. Now last year when we published our plan, we thought that we would be organized enough and ready to sell shares, because we're going to create a new company that will be our processing facility. Quite closely with some First Nations on the Coquitlam tribe's lands, and we hope to be getting a building that will be put on some property, and actually they'll be having the Coquitlam tribe canoes stored underneath our kitchen, and that's something that we are still working on, but it's taking some time because we've got to get the Coquitlam tribes to help us put in a septic system, which has just been a real headache. So we're kind of caught up there, but we want to work with the First Nations, we want to employ them, we want them to be our landlords, we want to do everything we can to help them heal from the damage that the Western society has inflicted on them on many levels. And so that's part of our strategic plan. Now, in the next few months, we do hope to be selling shares in the club bakery, it will be called, and there will be certainly lots of announcements about that. If I have my stuff together, actually April 20th we'll be doing that, but I haven't announced that just yet. But in our strategic plan, we also had a raid. We anticipated that we would be getting raided, that there would be no way that we could stop the authorities, the safety unit, from coming into that day from happening. So 3 months today, on this November the 14th, the CSU came into our club and seized approximately $25,000 worth of medicine. Certainly more than we had hoped to have in the store. We kind of got caught with more than we planned. But we did have lots of stash spots and that around, so we reopened the next day, no problem. And have been open since. However, the government actions against us have continued. A couple weeks ago, FinTrack, which of Revenue Canada, shut down our credit union that had us and a few other cannabis businesses using their facilities. So we've had to get some new bank accounts to keep things going. And just yesterday, the first fine in British Columbia was issued to the first dispensary in Victoria that was raided, and Alex Robb, the manager of Trees, was fined $1.5 million. Unbelievable amount of money for the raids that happened on 2 Trees locations. Now, the total of $1.5 million was calculated in a way that was different than what we were told beforehand. We were told before, it seemed that the fines we would get were double of what they said the seized, or the value of the seized goods would be. But the fine of $1.5 million was calculated apparently by adding up 2 months worth of sales plus what was seized, and then doubling that amount. In other words, they made it up. And so, if our club is subjected to the same type of calculations and its fine, we think that it's going to be around $800,000 that our Compassion Club is going to get fined because of that raid in November.
Imagine if they did that
now,
to a nightclub for after hours.
There is an appeal process, but the appeal is to the person that made that decision. So we're not sure if Alex is going to go that route. We're kind of hoping he is, because we believe that that should be challenged, that there's no way that a situation could be called fair if the appeal process is to the person that made the decision in the first place. That's not really an appeal at all. So that needs to be changed, and we're hoping that Alex fights it to do so. It's hard to say whether or not he will be able to successfully challenge this. I haven't talked to him yet, and wish him all the best. I've only learned recently of this. But we did anticipate fines. We've also anticipated them trying to seize the property from our landlord. In Nova Scotia last week, in Halifax, the pharmacist landlord was just served and told that if they were allowed or if they continued to have the Compassion Club in their building, that it would be seized. However, that notice was issued by the city, and I haven't had a chance to look into this yet. But in Victoria, despite all these problems, we do have hope, because we have had a very excellent relationship with our mayor and city council for the longest time, since literally 1995. I have been going at least once a year to our city council and advocating for their support. And so when we were raided in November, a few weeks later, I presented to City Council. Many of our members wrote and spoke to Council, either formally or just informally. After a very, I think, excellent presentation in December with a full chamber of supporters, gives the Lieutenant Governor, through the Cabinet, the ability to grant sweeping exemptions from the laws and regulations. And so the city, not only in the letter to the Premier, requested this exemption, but they included other suggestions that I asked for, including that no enforcement actions be taken against our club, that we be given a fair hearing before a decision is made, and that if it was granted, that we would essentially strike a committee made up of various levels of government and the city and us to discuss our work towards full compliance of the law as the years go by. And so we were very pleased with the letter from the city, and I think it was on the 21st of January that was sent out. However, despite the glee from getting that and some media reports, we do not have an exemption. Made a mistake here. The province and the federal government have a lot of vested interest in them to admit that they have done wrong here for a few reasons. Not only because they hate to do that, they never admit that unless they've been forced to do so in court, but I've come to understand that it may even be the case that if they grant us this exemption without a fight, that then they've lost their authority to convict anyone on any trafficking cases in Canada, because in giving us an exemption, they would essentially be admitting that the laws are constitutionally flawed in a way that is harmful to patients. And if they admit to that, then according to the matter of standings,
we fought to the Supreme Court of Canada for in 2015, there's actually two critical issues that we won at the Supreme Court of Canada. The right to extract was one, but the other very important fundamental principle of law that we established was the matter of standing, which means that you cannot be convicted of a law in this country if that law violates anybody's rights, not just yours. And so if the government gives us this exemption, if the province and federal government go ahead without a fight, then essentially they've lost their ability to convict anybody with the trafficking laws until we or the courts have been satisfied that their rules are constitutional. And unfortunately, time and time again, the courts have stood up and said, no, Health Canada's medical marijuana programs might not be that great, but they're good enough. Just a couple weeks ago in a case here in Vancouver where a bunch of dispensaries were fighting the city and their regulations that didn't give them a license, there was a few issues that were brought up, and this was one of them. Again, the courts determined that Section 7 was not being violated, that the medical marijuana system, even though it's just mail order with the same products that recreational consumers have, that's good enough. That doesn't have to be that great according to the courts, which is really sad because the bar has got to be higher than that, because there's a lot of patients that are suffering, low-income patients, people suffering with addictions that need high-quality, low-cost medicines that are not available in the legal system. And so, while that might be good enough for the courts, it's not good enough for the court of public opinion. And we're seeing that clearly as we go around, as we did with our Victoria City Council. Because in a way, I consider the Victoria City Council sort of like the court of public opinion. And the City Council not only unanimously agreed that these laws need to be struck down, that we need to get an exemption, but the City Council of Victoria didn't even debate it. They didn't even discuss whether we should get this exemption. Even the most conservative councillor didn't ask, what is this going to mean? I want to know what it's going to mean because it's still being played out. That what has happened here has been so fundamentally wrong that we cannot allow compassion clubs to be wiped out of existence for this experiment to be followed through on. And so we're really hoping to find some wisdom in government to do that. And so the avenues that we've been taking have been to mostly approach the provincial government. Today we're here at a federal Liberal MP's office because in part the Liberals and the federal government also need to be included in this, although again it'll probably be through court, not through political willness. But the fact is that we're trying this first. We're trying to appease to the politicians. Our local MLA in Victoria, Carol James, is not only the Vice Premier, but she's the Minister of Finances for the government of BC, so she has a lot of power. Her and Mike Farnworth basically worked hand in hand to create these regulations, and so we're doing everything we can to pressure her into conceding or helping us with this exemption. We're certainly also applying pressure on other local politicians. Rod Fleming, our Minister of Education, and Lana Popoff, our Minister of Agriculture, is our target next Friday. And so we're working that angle. We're also working the Green Party angle. It's so wonderful and ironic, but Nikki, my social media manager, and one of the assistant manager of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club as well, just happens to be the niece of Sonia Firstenoff, who's running for the leadership of the BC Green Party. And so we're working very hard to get the support of the BC Green Party towards this exemption for a few reasons. Partly because the NDP won't grant it without their support, but also because we have an election coming up and we want to be able to help the Green Party beat the NDP up essentially on this issue and inform them about the nuances of law that make it so difficult for us to comply and why recreational consumers should also be upset. So we really think that the Green Party will be the party to help us, but they won't be able to give us this exemption. And like I say, the MLAs and the cabinet or the cabinet committees that would do this are also very unlikely to do that. So one of the other avenues that just kind of come to me this week that we're going to pressure is the Cannabis Secretariat. the BC government has created this body of bureaucrats, essentially, that are made up of a number of stakeholders like police departments and others. And it's this Cannabis Secretariat that is really overseeing the community safety unit and overseeing the licensing of retail stores and working with all these different levels of government. And so we need to apply pressure to the Cannabis Secretariat to get this exemption. But I really believe, after discussing this and thinking it thoroughly, that we're going to be told no, and we almost have to accept that we will be in order to fight it in court, because they're not just going to agree. I really don't think that they will. But that doesn't mean that's the end of the game. You know, we've been arrested and told no time and time again. But we know what's right, and we will be able to argue one way or another for what is just and compassionate. And so it will take getting in front of a judge to do that. But I firmly believe that having the support of Victoria City Council and the public is critical in working towards that. Because when we do finally get in front of a judge and explain to them things like the person that wrote the fine is the one we were supposed to appeal to, no judge in their right mind will think that that is an adequate, legal, constitutionally sound way of acting. And so I'm quite certain that given the situation, we will win when we get to court, but ironically, we're going to have to get a no to be able to do that. And it's something that has happened historically as well. Back when the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act was created in 1996, there was no medical marijuana programs or anything. And so an individual, Jim Wakefield, I believe was his name, or Wakeford, and there's another gentleman as well, actually, but Jim's the one that got all the attention, argued and won that they needed access to medical cannabis. The judge saw that there was an exemption program to work. So a few years later, when it was completely not working, the court system, in the case of Terry Parker, struck down the exemption program as the MMAR came into effect, which never worked, but was the really part of the story towards today. And so certainly, having an exemption program in existence, whether the exemptions were granted or not, is not a guarantee that the government will have its way. In times past with new legislation, the exemption process was struck down as unconstitutional. And I think that we have a very good chance of doing that again. It's just going to take a lot of effort and thought, towards that. And so, but at the same time, we need to keep up the political efforts and have, patients and supporters continuing to write emails and make phone calls and get, when they're in public to remind them of the importance of this matter and that they need to find a resolution that will work in the best interest of patients. Because we wouldn't have a legal cannabis system the fights that patients and their caregivers fought for years. And so after winning the battle for patients' access, it's really unfortunate and dismal to see what's happened now. But I believe that we can continue to fight for the good fight and make the changes that we need to see happen. So at this point, I'm going to invite my friend Dana to come up. I never warn him, but I just love to hear him speak, and he's always got great things to say. So thank you again for all your support over the years, Dana.
Thank you, Ted, for giving me a chance to speak and for all those amazing words. Ted's always been an inspiration to me.
By the way,
and
Ted
is an incredible guy, and the work they're doing in Victoria is really amazing. And getting Victoria City Council to come on board and support their dispensary is really historic and wonderful. And of course, we need the same kind of thing to be happening here in Vancouver. And people think of Vancouver as a cannabis-friendly city, but you wouldn't get that from our city council, which has put in some of the most restrictive and punitive cannabis bylaws in the country. The city's only there maybe 24 legal shops in the end, but they want to treat bong shops the same way to sell bongs. there's a lot of gas stations and corner stores that sell these products, and they're going to be facing this kind of enforcement as well. So the stigma and the punishments very much remain. And not too far from here on Thurlow, we got raided and cleaned out last year in October, and we've got some legal challenges and battles going on there. That's okay. But it's very expensive and difficult to fight these things, and when they come and take all your cannabis, it makes it difficult to keep the money flowing to the lawyers and being able to engage in court. And I really think we need the city of Vancouver to be coming on board and dispensaries as they have been doing, as they've done in Victoria. And I think it's really interesting that some of the last dispensaries standing are also some of the first ones to open up. And you know, Ted was pointing out over 40 clubs in Victoria. There was over 100 cannabis in Vancouver. It was really a golden age. It's one that I wish would last a lot longer. And now we're down getting water. Now we're down to a very small number of places to purchase and access cannabis in Vancouver, and so it's a real and things are going to be better. And in some ways they're better, but in a lot of ways they're really worse for a lot of people. You know, what's good about the legalization we've gotten is there's going to be about 50 or 60,000 less cannabis possession arrests in Canada over the coming year and over every year, and that is something that should be celebrated as a great victory. But what we're seeing also is a takeover of the cannabis industry and to eliminate people that have been growing and selling and sharing and providing cannabis and medical cannabis for decades and replacing it with a highly corporatized and really a big Ponzi scheme. But we're seeing all these stocks crashing, and a lot of Canadians have lost a lot of money. They invested in the cannabis industry thinking they were going to be able to support their retirement or generate some revenue, and instead they've seen these stocks crash. And anybody paying attention knew this was going to happen. And what frustrates me is that they want to market for their problems, and that is not the case. They should be pointing the fingers the same way we're pointing them at Health Canada and at the government, which has done everything to extinguish and the legacy market, medical cannabis users in the cannabis industry, and replace it with something else. And that's what should be about. Ending prohibition and stopping the arrest, stopping the punishment, and recognizing that cannabis users, cannabis growers, cannabis sellers, and everyone else involved with cannabis are actually by and large good who want to belong to break any other laws and who just want to have the same rights and the same treatment as everyone else gets. And that really is not too much to ask. And you know, it's such a hypocrisy that so many of these politicians use cannabis themselves. A politician has come out and said, I smoke cannabis, and I'm happy to talk about that. It is legal now, and you know, they'll all pose. Even politicians who don't drink will pose with bottles of wine and glasses of beer and stuff to promote those industries and to seem approachable. But not one of them will pose with a bag of weed or a live plant. And so we still have so much work to do. And for me, you know, it goes beyond cannabis. Cannabis is the world's greatest plant. It's one of the most beneficial and useful and least risky substances you can ingest. But ultimately, we got to talk about ending the whole war on drug users and recognizing that it is prohibition itself that makes everything more dangerous, makes things more deadly, and is really the root problem of what we call the drug problem is really a prohibition problem. And until we recognize that, we're going to be stuck in the same place, going over these same issues over and over again. And you know, we had 2 cannabis dispensaries, and we were forced by the city to shut one down, our spot on East Hastings. And we've reopened it or reinvigorated as a Get Your Drugs Tested center and as a supervised safe injection site and as a place for people to find out what they're putting in their bodies and make sure they can make informed decisions. And I think this is very important work. And to me, it goes hand in hand with the cannabis liberalization and access movement. These things are all tied together, very much so. And you know, what we call the war on drugs is really a war on plants. And it's really a war on the world's most sacred, medicinally beneficial, and culturally relevant plants. And whether that's the coca leaf, or the peyote cactus, or the psilocybe mushroom, or the cannabis flower, or the opium poppy, All of these are incredibly beneficial, useful, positive allies to humans in the plant kingdom. And we have distorted, destroyed, cut off access, and tried to replace them with much more dangerous, synthetic, and harmful substances. And people should have the right to grow any plant in their garden that they choose, and to ingest anything they want into their own bodies. And if we allow that, we will see that people will make responsible choices. When your only choice is to suffer in pain or use a dangerous street drug of unknown contents, you're going to have to make that choice sometimes to do something that you know is risky. If we had legal access at opium parlors and coca tea houses and psychedelic retreats and cannabis lounges and all of these things, the vast majority of drug users will tend towards the safer, better choices. And that is just how it works with everything else and how we should be treating all of this. But you know, when it comes to cannabis and the cannabis laws in this country, we have so much more work to do. We have so much more fighting to do to stand up. And we have accomplished great things. You know, some people tell me that they're so disheartened by legalization. We have to remember, we have accomplished a lot. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma, a lot of people who want to profit off of prohibition, people who make their livings off of prohibition, and of course many of these folks who spent their lives and careers attacking, punishing, harassing, arresting, jailing, and persecuting cannabis users are now growing cannabis themselves. And you know, it's one thing, I'm all for police officers and people to give up their jobs and move into the cannabis industry and grow cannabis, but there first has to be an apology and a reckoning and an acknowledgement. And instead they want to continue to demonize and stigmatize the cannabis users and growers and try to replace us and destroy us and replace it grown is absolutely wrong and needs to be stood against and needs to be recognized for what it is, an abomination.
I think you're a hypocrite, sir.
Well, that's fine.
I think you're a hypocrite. And I'll tell you why I think you're a hypocrite.
Well, you know, maybe this is Ted Smith's rally, and maybe let's save those conversations for another time.
This is ridiculous. You're the worker, he's the politician. Money. And that's
money. Our dispensary does turn a profit. Absolutely, we turn a profit. And we use that money to help our community, to fund things like the Get Your Drugs Tested program, to provide cannabis to people who can't afford it. And I think one of the differences between what the cannabis movement, the legacy movement, and the LPs is that we want to open the door for everybody else. We want to make sure that everybody can do it. Our dispensary, yeah, we make a profit. Yeah, we sell our profits for products for more than we charge for them. You have to do that to be able to run a business. But I believe that we were opening the way for others to follow us and to build an industry and to allow more and more people to do that. And what I see with the licensed producers in this system is that they want to close the door behind them when they have access. We got ours, Jack. We don't need to fight for better rules. We got through the fees and the bureaucracy and the challenges, and so there's no interest in making it more accessible for anything else. And I think that's the difference. And the dispensary movement was about opening it up for everybody and allowing anybody to enter into this as long as you behave. The market decides. Let people decide with their dollars and their feet where they want to go and how cannabis. And I wouldn't say every else, of course not. But by and large, the dispensary movement was activists, and it was about increasing access, it's about patient access, and it's about where anybody can participate. And that is what I think what makes our movement different and special. Certainly that's how I've always approached it, tried to our example. I recently launched a psilocybin mushroom microdosing dispensary, and I'm looking come and do therapeutic setting.
Where's that?
Well, our microdose dispensary is online. It's not a physical storefront. Mushroomdispensary.com. And I really want others. I'm certainly not the first person to sell mushrooms by any means, but I hope that others will be inspired. And they go, hey, Dana's been doing nothing's happened to him. Maybe I can open a psychedelic retreat in my town. Maybe I can do a mushroom dispensary or a microdosing LSD dispensary or something else along those lines that isn't the same, but is, I think there's room for all of us in this market. And that is what I think makes a difference. And Ted also has always been an example of that, of trying to lead others. I've never feared competition because this is a massive industry. And if the day comes and my dispensary is no longer needed, when there is such good access out there that the products that we're supplying are no longer required, I am more than happy to shut down or join the legal system or change. You know, I did not get into this so I can have a cannabis shop. I got into this so that there could be cannabis shops. And I have to be the one to open it to make that start to happen. And our effort was always about encouraging other Canadians from coast to coast to build this in their own communities. That's what this movement has always been about. And I do spiritual cannabis use. What about creative enhancement? What about all the other things? The idea of recreational, that term's always seemed kind of stigmatizing and dismissive to me, is that it's just kind of a fun, frivolous, unimportant activity. But for many people, especially I think those gathered here, cannabis use is an integral part of how we define ourselves and how our own identity. And not every cannabis user feels that way. For some people, it's just something they do once in a while as a thing. But there's a lot of Canadians who have been profoundly affected by their use of cannabis, which has given them insight and healing and psychological and emotional benefits. And I know it's not an organized religion, but I don't go to a church, but to me, cannabis and sacred plants, that is my religion. And many people would say that is the primal religion, and that is the basis of many spiritual and religious journeys, is the entheogenic use of these kinds of plants, of cannabis and psychedelics. And many argue that this was in many ways the origins of a lot of our modern spiritual processes and churches and things. And so this is much bigger than just medical. It's much bigger than just recreation. It's about our right to communicate, to contact the earth, our right to plant the seeds that we choose, our right to control our own bodies and make our own informed decisions about what we put in our bodies. And that is no one's decision but your own. And prohibition just makes it much harder and more difficult to make those decisions. It makes it almost impossible to use many of these things in a responsible and knowledgeable way, because they have put these laws in place that stigmatize and punish and persecute and imprison. And so I'm very grateful for the work that Ted Smith has done in Victoria. We would never have opened our dispensaries in Vancouver without the pioneering work done by Ted Smith and the work done by Hillary Black and the other clubs that were very early and opened things up. And I just hope that we can get back to a place where there is 100 shops or 200 shops in Vancouver and dozens of cannabis dispensaries and cannabis access. And I don't really care. I mean, I'd prefer all things being equal, yeah. I'd rather it all be legal, and I'd rather it be regulated in a proper sell are safe and accessible. That's what legalization should be about. And we're doing that already. We don't need the government overseeing us, but that is an appropriate role for the government, to make sure your label is what it says it is. The role of government is not to say you can only put a tiny, tiny amount of cannabinoids into this product and we're going to tax the hell out of it. And if you want it for medical use, it's going to be harder to get than if you just want to have some fun with it or you want to use it for a different reason. We're going to make medical use hard to continue. And the fact is that it is one of the world's greatest plants, if not the greatest plant on earth. And we need to recognize that. We need to reintegrate cannabis back into our society, medicinally, spiritually, socially, industrially, as a building material, as a fuel, as a fiber, as all these wonderful things that cannabis can do. And our Canada has also long been hampered by this terrible fear and stigmatization around cannabis. And you know, in civil disobedience and in the courts. But ultimately, this is a political solution we are seeking. And we do need to engage our politicians. And we are making progress. We are getting closer and closer. It just takes so damn long. 30 years I've been at this, and Ted, I think, around the same. And we have many, many years to go. But I think what we're doing here is important. I think engaging with politicians is important. I think coming out of the grow closet, and that's a very important protest as well. And you know, I've devoted my life to ending cannabis prohibition and fighting the drug war. And I think that, I do not regret that at all. I think it's been a very fulfilling and positive, and it's been wonderful for me to see the growth of this movement. A few crazy people out there put it all on the line, Ted Smith and others in the early days, to something that is a national movement with millions of Canadians participating. We have much better place. We have inspired people from our work here in Vancouver and Victoria, not only many of the people around the world who are looking at much worse situations in their own countries. And they may not know all the details, but they go, hey, Canada legalized. Why can't we do that here? Why can't we do that in Mexico? Why can't we do that in South America? Why can't we do that in Europe and Africa and Asia? And so the walls are crumbling, and we need to work locally and make sure our legalization in Canada is a real legalization that really puts patients first, that really recognizes that prohibition was the harm all along. And this is more than just Vancouver and Victoria, it's more than just BC, it's more than just Canada. This is a global transformation movement. And what we're doing here will echo around the world and through history. And so I encourage you, and I'm sure you all do this already, but try to do something every day to help end the cannabis prohibition. Because that's what we make it happen, a little bit at a time, working together and being here. Thank you so much for coming out and participating today. And I'm going to give the mic back to Ted, and thank you very much. I'll give it to Neil. Here you go.
Hey, thanks for being here. Happy Valentine's Day. You know, this is the day we talk about love, and we should talk about love every day, because love is the answer to everything. But you know, there's different types of love, and Dana's got some weirdness to what's going on about greed, and the greed is at the top of our society. It runs right straight to the top, and it is in the form of what we would call corruption. And that corruption shows its ugly face every time there's an option to be made by our government about whether or not they want to do something and make some money and hurt people, or whether or not they want to help people and do something good. And there is no better example going on anywhere than the attempt to over-restrict and regulate and originally prohibit cannabis. This is a plant. We are many people. And in fact, right now what we got going on in our society completely as a result of prohibition is an opioid crisis of people dying from tainted street drugs that are there because people have to go to the streets for the drugs that they want because the government won't let you have it. And it's all driven by money, but it's causing people to die. We have sick and suffering Canadians, many of whom were members of Ted's Club in Victoria. Thousands of people there going there for help with cannabis for their medical situations. But we've also got thousands of people that are struggling with the addiction to opioids. And if they only knew that high-dose cannabis edibles can replace those opioids, then they would switch in a heartbeat if they could get it. But the government isn't even allowing that. This is murder by your public servants in the name of greed, satisfying corporate issues about controlling us and causing us to buy or forcing us to buy pharmaceuticals, fossil fuels, overpriced and unnutritious food, all the things that they're forcing on us by their regulations that are nothing about people and all about profits. We need public servants that will care about people. What type of a human being that's standing in between a sick and suffering dying person and what can save them would not just get the hell out of the way or help them get it? Who are these people that know, they damn well know that cannabis is a healing herb that saves people's lives, that gets them off of hard drugs and gives them a better quality of life than they can have otherwise? They know that, and yet they're willing to lie, to stand in our way of us and not allow us to have access to what is the most available, best, safest herb on the planet. There's no need for over-regulation. I'm kind of with Dana. If you want to sell anything to the public, you should probably have the scrutiny of government and some type of a license to do that. The pharmacists have to pay $175 here in Vancouver for a license to do that. Anytime you want to sell to the public something, you should probably have some government scrutiny. But that should all be based on the substance that you're trying to regulate. And in the case of cannabis, the safest, least toxic, most friendly plant in nature to human beings doesn't require regulations that are anything but a little bit of a warning that in its concentrated form, you might green out if you're not used to it, and in an edible form, you can eat enough to knock yourself out for a few days, and people need to know that. But in its smoked form, you can't smoke enough to knock you out. It'll never hurt you. There's no hospital rooms filled with people that are harmed because of cannabis or the use of cannabis. There's no public safety emergency that has anything to do with cannabis. But cannabis can get us out of the public safety emergency that we're dealing with right now. But instead of the millions of dollars that our governments are giving to pharmaceutical companies because they're going to give the answer to the opioid crisis, they've got a different type of opioid that you can use instead of the one that's causing you problems, and the money's still going to the evil people that got us here in the first place, thanks to your government, and very little of it or nothing is going to what should be going to, and that's getting people access to high-dose cannabis edibles. We have a project here in Vancouver called the Cannabis Substitution Project. For 3 years we've been giving out cannabis high-dose edibles at Main and Hastings out of Vandu there. We've got a couple hundred people that line up twice a week. We give out about 2,000 high-dose edibles a week, and we've been doing this for 3 years now. We've had no interference from government. Well, that's great, but where are they? Why aren't they supporting us? Why aren't they there talking to the people that are getting saved by cannabis? Why aren't they coming there and doing the studies and figuring it out, and then when they understand that cannabis works for many, many people, why aren't they making it so that everybody knows that and allowing us to have medical dispensaries, low barrier access? And on that note, I gotta say, our project did force the Vancouver City Council to pass a motion 3 months ago, about the same time as Ted's Club was being raided, that they would allow low barrier access to cannabis to address the opioid crisis, and that has to mean high dose edibles. But they haven't moved an inch on that to date. We did have a meeting with them on Monday, and the councillor that brought that motion forward is certainly in favor of us opening up a place that would allow for that, but wanting to go through proper procedures and processes. Meanwhile, we're still giving it away twice a week, and we're going to open a storefront with or without them. We do want them on board. We're not cowboys. We're not trying to hide. We want government support. We're doing the right things. And well, maybe we can get some movement down the road on that. But it's just, it's outrageous. I'm outraged. It's such a crime against us and all of humanity that our governments have been so perverted. They've taken advantage of all of the slack that was there and extended their powers and used those powers to have profits protected and not people protected. So shame on them and using it against us. This is supposed to be a free country and a free society, but we all know that it's not like that. The only freedom that exists here is for the Prime Minister. He gets to kind of do what he wants. Everybody else, we gotta obey. We're free to obey here. That's not the way it should be. It's not the way it was meant to be. We need to sit down and talk about it. Have a revisiting of our democracy. Make sure that we're getting public servants that are limited in their power to interfere with people's lives if you're not interfering with somebody else. Make sure we clearly divide powers for the purpose of trying to help people feel better. Is not a crime, never was a crime, never should have been a crime, and it's that perversion that's got us so deeply in the shit that we're in here right now with this opioid crisis and the rest of it. So do something. As Dana said, it's our community. We all need to do something, some little thing every day. Everybody's got a different take on it. We need your take on it. We're all different people. We all have different ideas about what we can do, and if we all use all of our ideas, maybe we can get back to having a country that is free, people that are in charge, and governments that are simply public servants that recognize that they're limited in their powers, that they're accountable if they go against public will and what's best for the public. Right now, our governments have no accountability. They get elected into power, they can that they want, they can make the laws that they want, and if we don't like it, if it's even corrupt, there's very little we can do about it but vote them out the next time around. And we've got very little to choose from when we're voting out voting in a new bunch the next time around. There's the green, there's the red, and they're both controlled by the corporate elite. And there's the orange, and we don't really have a chance they're going to be controlled by the corporate elite. So we just need to change things a little bit. We need to tweak our democracy, to put those proper limits in place, to make it so that these public servants are accountable if they sell us out to the corporate elite like they have and do every day here. I want that in there too. I think that's reasonable. They should be transparent in their jobs. We should be able to look on our smartphones anytime we want, dial up MP Watch. What's your MP doing? And see what's going on. So if we do this right, we can have it handed over to the next generation in a way that makes sense. Instead of handing them over something where we just teach them, be afraid of your government, the police are not really to be trusted, this is just the way it is, get along and just obey. That's not what we need to teach our kids. We need to teach our kids to value freedom, to fight for freedom, to make sure that we are all everywhere as best we can. And the last place you should be finding a bully is in a government job where we're paying them to be our servants and to protect us from those very bullies. So our situation, our society is upside down because we've allowed it to be that way. It's up to us to change it, and that's what we can do. I want to thank Ted from the Victoria Buyers Cannabis Club for coming here and for all the different protests that he's putting on. He's paving the way for the rest of us. We need to have these events. We need to have a place where our voices can be heard, because there's a lot of people that are not happy with what's going on. In fact, there's a lot of people that are sick because of what's going on. In fact, there's a lot of people that are dying because of what's going on. And the murder is being done by our public servants in denying people access to cannabis high-dose edibles to address the opioid crisis and for all the other things that cannabis is saving people's lives from. So shame on them. Thanks to all of you. I love all you people, and that's the theme of the day is love. And Ted Smith, I love him too. How can you not? The guy spent his whole life trying to help people get access. I don't know how many lives he's saved, and he can't count them either. And there's a whole bunch more coming. Thank you so much, Ted. Love you, brother.
Thank you, Dale. And thanks, Dana, as well, for the kind words. And thank you all for coming. Yeah, we're going to be here until just about 4, but I think we're going to... And again, we just really appreciate all the efforts that people have been making, both coming here and online and writing letters and such. We will be keeping up this campaign. I'm actually not sure right now when I'm going to be back in Vancouver next. I really need to focus on the island for my own personal health and for the club. So I don't have a date in mind for the next time I'm over, at least here, but I may be on the mainland next month. In fact, going to the Okanagan. So that may coming here next month. And then we'll see about April and May. I'm not exactly sure when the fun run is, but I got to talk to Dana about getting back my herb costume, because I want to do some marathons in herb again this year. So the next time you see me, maybe running down the streets of Vancouver in an 11-foot tall pot leaf costume. So again, thank you all for coming today, and smoke them if you got them.